I knew something was wrong the moment I saw her face. My wife stood in our kitchen, bathed in the harsh fluorescent light, staring at our son with empty eyes. She looked like my wife. Same blonde hair, same slender frame, but something was off. The way she tilted her head when our boy asked for breakfast, the mechanical precision of her movements as she poured his cereal, the complete absence of the gentle smile that had always been reserved just for him.
Hey buddy, why don't you go get dressed for school? I need to talk to your mom for a minute.
My son nodded and scampered off upstairs. I waited until I heard his bedroom door close before I approached her. She turned to me with that same vacant expression, her eyes lacking the warmth I'd known for 12 years of marriage.
Who are you?
What do you mean? I'm your wife.
No, no you're not. Where is she?
You're being ridiculous. I made coffee. Would you like some?
Her voice was perfect, the exact pitch and cadence of my wife's, but there was no inflection, no humanity behind the words, just empty sounds strung together in a convincing imitation.
Our anniversary, when is it?
June 17th.
What did I give you last year?
A silver necklace with a heart pendant.
All correct answers, but I wasn't convinced.
What did you whisper to me on our wedding night after everyone had gone home and we were alone?
A flicker of something, confusion perhaps, crossed her face before it settled back into that placid mask.
I told you I would love you until the stars burned out.
Wrong. My wife had said she'd love me even when the stars burn out. A small difference, but a difference nonetheless. I backed away slowly.
I'm taking our son to school today.
That's fine. I'll be here when you get back.
The way she said it, not as a reassurance, but as a statement of fact, sent chills down my spine. I hurried upstairs, told my son to grab his backpack, and rushed him out to the car. As we pulled away, I glanced back at the house. She stood in the window, watching us with those empty eyes, her hand raised in a perfect imitation of a wave.
Hey buddy, did Mom seem different to you this morning?
Kind of. She didn't kiss my forehead like she always does. And she put the wrong cereal in my bowl.
After dropping my son at school, I called in sick to work and drove to my mother-in-law's house. If anyone would know what was happening, it would be her. My wife and her mother spoke every day.
She hasn't called me in 3 days. I've been worried sick, but she always gets annoyed when I check up on her too much.
3 days. That's when I noticed the change.
What changed?
I explained everything, the vacant stares, the mechanical movements, the wrong anniversary response. My mother-in-law listened with growing concern.
There's something I need to show you.
She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with an old leather-bound book. Its pages were yellowed with age, the text handwritten in faded ink.
This has been in our family for generations. I never showed it to your wife because I hoped we'd never need it.
She opened the book to a page marked with a red ribbon. The header read, "The Unmother."
It's an ancient entity that takes the form of mothers. It studies them, learns their mannerisms, their memories, and then replaces them.
Replaces them? What happens to the real mother?
According to this, the real mother is taken to a place between worlds. A kind of trial begins.
What kind of trial?
The Unmother challenges the real mother's worthiness. If she fails, the Unmother keeps her place in our world permanently. If she passes...
She comes back?
Yes, but it's rare. The trial is designed to break even the strongest maternal bond.
I felt sick. My wife, my real wife, was trapped somewhere, being tested while this thing lived in our house, interacted with our son.
How do we stop it? How do we get my wife back?
The book says the Unmother can be forced to reveal the location of the trial but only if confronted by the child's father and grandmother together. We have to make it admit what it is.
We formulated a plan. That evening, after picking up my son from school and dropping him off at a friend's house for a sleepover, my mother-in-law and I returned to my home. The Unmother was in the kitchen, preparing dinner as if nothing was amiss.
Oh, hello. I didn't know your mother was coming over.
I thought I'd surprise you.
The Unmother's eyes narrowed slightly, the first genuine emotion I'd seen on that face in days.
How thoughtful. I'll set another place for dinner.
Before that, we need to talk.
About what?
About where my wife is.
The Unmother's movements stilled. She placed the knife she'd been using to chop vegetables carefully on the cutting board.
Right here.
No, you're not my daughter. Where is she?
The air in the kitchen seemed to thicken. The lights flickered once, twice.
I don't know what you're talking about. I think you both should leave.
We're not going anywhere until you tell us where she is.
The Unmother's face contorted into something inhuman for just a split second. A glimpse of what lay beneath the perfect disguise.
She's where she deserves to be. Being tested. Being judged.
The trial of the Unmother.
So you know, it doesn't matter. She will fail, as they all do, and I will stay.
Take us to her.
Why would I do that?
Because if you don't, we'll expose you. The book says an Unmother revealed to the community must return to the void.
The Unmother hissed, a sound no human throat could produce.
You would risk her life? The trial is dangerous. If you interrupt it and she fails afterward, she doesn't just lose her place here, she ceases to exist entirely.
Jay won't fail, I know my wife.
The Unmother studied us for a long moment, then nodded.
Very well, but remember, this was your choice.
She extended her hands to us. Reluctantly, I took one, while my mother-in-law took the other. The kitchen around us began to blur and fade, colors running like wet paint. I felt a sensation of falling, though my feet never left the ground. When the world solidified again, we were elsewhere. It looked like a courtroom, but wrong in every way. The walls seemed to breathe. The ceiling was too high, disappearing into darkness, and seated on a bench that resembled a twisted spine was a figure I couldn't quite focus on. Its features shifting constantly, its only consistent aspect being a pair of glowing red eyes.
The judge awaits. Your wife has already begun her trial.
In the center of the room, kneeling on the floor, was my wife. My real wife. She looked exhausted, her face streaked with tears, her body trembling.
What have you done to her?
I've done nothing. The trial tests her worthiness as a mother. She must prove her love is unconditional, her devotion absolute.
I started toward my wife, but the Unmother's grip on my arm tightened painfully.
Interfere and she fails automatically.
I watched helplessly as my wife raised her head to look at the judge. Her voice was hoarse, as if she'd been screaming.
Please. I've answered every question. I've endured every test. Let me go back to my family.
The judge's voice filled the room, though it had no discernible mouth.
One final test remains. The child you claim to love so dearly, would you die for him?
Yes, without hesitation.
Would you kill for him?
To protect him, yes.
Would you kill him?
My wife recoiled in horror.
What? No, never.
Even if his continued existence meant suffering for all others? Even if he were to become a monster who inflicted pain on countless innocents?
I would find another way. I would help him, guide him, save him from that fate.
There is no other way in this scenario. Answer the question.
My wife's shoulders slumped. She looked defeated.
I couldn't do it. I couldn't kill my child, even to save others. If that makes me unworthy, then so be it.
The courtroom fell silent. The judge leaned forward, its shifting features momentarily coalescing into something almost human.
And that is why you passed the trial.
My wife looked up, confusion written across her face.
I pass, but I failed your test.
The test was not whether you would kill your child for the greater good. The test was whether you would compromise your love to please authority. A true mother protects her child, even from those who claim moral superiority.
The judge turned its burning gaze to the Unmother, who had gone very still beside me.
You have failed to replace this mother. Return to the void.
No, I studied her perfectly. I know everything about her.
You know facts, you do not know love.
The Unmother let out a terrible scream as her form began to dissolve, melting like wax under a flame. Within seconds, she was gone, leaving only a dark stain on the floor. The judge nodded once to my wife.
Go, your family awaits.
The courtroom began to fade around us. I rushed to my wife's side, helping her to her feet, holding her close as reality shifted once more. When the world settled, we were back in our kitchen. My wife, her mother, and me. My wife collapsed into my arms, sobbing with relief.
3 days. It felt like years. The questions never stopped. The scenarios they forced me to imagine. Terrible things happening to our son. Choices no parent should ever have to make.
It's over now, you're home.
You passed the trial. You proved yourself a true mother.
How did you know? How did you know it wasn't me?
I held her face in my hands, looking into her eyes. Warm, loving, human eyes.
Because no one could ever truly replicate you. Not the way you look at our son, not the way you love us.
Later that night, after my mother-in-law had gone home and we'd picked up our son from his friend's house, I watched my wife tuck him into bed. She kissed his forehead, the ritual the Unmother had forgotten, and whispered that she loved him.
Mom, are you okay? You seem different.
I'm just happy to be home, sweetheart. So very happy.
As we closed his bedroom door, my wife squeezed my hand.
The judge said something else before I left. It said the Unmother wasn't the only one of its kind. There are others, entities that replace fathers, siblings, friends.
How do we protect ourselves?
It said the only defense is to know each other so deeply that no imitation could ever fool us. To love so completely that the difference between real and fake becomes obvious.
That night, as my wife slept beside me, I stayed awake, watching the rise and fall of her chest, memorizing every detail of her face. I thought about how close we'd come to losing her forever, how easily the Unmother had slipped into our lives, and I wondered how many others weren't so lucky. How many families lived with replacements, never noticing the subtle wrongness. The missing kiss on the forehead, the slightly misremembered anniversary wish. How many children were being raised by things that wore their mothers' faces, but didn't know how to love? I pulled my wife closer, feeling the warmth of her body against mine, the very human rhythm of her heartbeat. And I made a silent promise to always pay attention, to never take for granted the people I loved. Because somewhere out there, the Unmothers were watching. Waiting for the moment when we stopped seeing each other clearly enough to notice when something wasn't right. As I finally drifted towards sleep, a troubling thought crossed my mind. The judge had mentioned other entities that replace loved ones. What if they weren't just watching us? What if they were already here? I glanced at my sleeping wife again, reassuring myself that she was real, that she had passed the trial. Yet what about everyone else in our lives? What about